Good morning friends and welcome to UPSC Logics, and in this particular video we shall have a look at the President's Rule. So we shall have a look at the grounds of imposition, then we shall have a look at parliamentary approval and duration, the consequences of the President's Rule and the use of Article 356. Then we shall have a look at the judicial scope and the latest, which is the president's rule that has been imposed in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So we shall have a look at what are the reasons behind it and how it is imposed. So let us begin. So let us have a look at the number of times the president rule has been imposed in the Indian states. And according to this map, it has been imposed 124 times. However, different books give a different number on this particular fact, that how many times president rule has been imposed. So it says Jammu and Kashmir has had president rule 6 times and Himachal has 2 times, and so on and so forth. And this particular chart gives us a number of times president rule has been imposed by different prime ministers, or the advice of different prime ministers. The president has imposed the president's rule. So Mr. Narendra Modi has done it 3 times, and the latest in this array of president rule is the imposition of president's rule in Jammu and Kashmir. So this is a very recent one, and the governor's rule ended on December 19, 2018. So on 23rd of December 2018, the president rule was imposed in Jammu and Kashmir. So this is one of the facts, and what needs to be understood here, that according to Factly, which filed an RTI, the president number of times the president rule has been imposed in different states according to the government is 115 times. So this is a question that needs to be answered correctly, because every place the number is different. So anyways, I've taken this map, and this gives you a good idea that how many times the president rule has been imposed in different states. So why is the president's rule imposed in a particular state? And let us have a look at the grounds of imposition against which president's rule can be implemented in a state. So Article 355 imposes a duty on the center to assure that the government of every state is carried on in accordance to the provisions of the Constitution. So let us have a look at what Article 355 has to say. It says that it is the duty of the Union to protect states against external aggression and internal disturbance. It shall be the duty of the Union to protect every state against external aggression and internal disturbance, and to ensure that the government of every state is carried on in accordance to the provisions of this Constitution. So what it means, that the power or the protection of the states lies with the Union or the center, and it is the duty of the Union to protect all the states from external aggression and internal disturbance. And this they can this they have to ensure that the government of every state is carried on in accordance with the provisions of this Constitution. So according to Article 356, in case of a failure of a constitutional machinery in a state, the government of the state comes under the center, and this is known as President's Rule. And this is also known as state emergency and constitutional emergency. So let us have a look at the grounds of declaration for President's Rule. And President's Rule can be proclaimed under Article 356 on two grounds. One has been mentioned in Article 356 itself, and the second one is mentioned in Article 365. So let us have a look at a bit more information about Article 356. And this has been inspired from the Section 93 of the Government of India Act 1935, and is very similar to what the Article 356 says. And it says that if a governor of a province was satisfied that the situation has arisen in which the government of the province cannot be carried in accordance with the provisions of the said act, he could assume to himself all or any of the powers of the government and discharge those functions in his discretion. The governor, however, could not encroach upon the powers of the High Court, and the same remains for the President of India as well, that he cannot encroach upon the powers of the High Court of the state in which the President's rule has been imposed. So let us have a look at what Article 356 has to say, and it says empowers the President to issue the proclamation if he is satisfied that a situation has arisen where the government of a state cannot carry out its duties in accordance to the provisions in the Constitution. He can also act on the report of the governor if the governor says that the state is not acting in accordance with the Constitution or the provisions given in the Constitution. However, he can act without the report of the governor as well. Article 365, on the other hand, says that whenever a state fails to comply with the instructions given by the center, it will be lawful for the president to hold that a situation has arisen in which the government of the state cannot be carried on. So whenever a state fails to comply with the instructions given by the center, the president has the right to impose president's rule. However, this particular article can be subject to scope for judicial review, that in case the state had valid reasons for not carrying out the instructions by the center, then of course the High Court or the Supreme Court can intervene in the implementation of the president's rule. So these are the 2 points under which the president's rule can be proclaimed. Now, just like the national emergency under Article 352, President's rule under Article 356 also requires a parliamentary approval and should be passed by both the houses within a period of 2 months from the date of issue. In case of a Lok Sabha being dissolved or dissolution of Lok Sabha takes place during the period of 2 months without the approval, then proclamation survives for 30 days from the first sitting of the Lok Sabha after its reconstitution, provided it is passed by the Rajya Sabha. And if it is approved, then it continues for 6 months and can be extended for a period of maximum 3 years with the approval of Parliament every 6 months. So the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 had raised this period from 6 months to a period of 1 year, but the 44th Amendment Act again reduced this period to a period of 6 months. And in case the Lok Sabha is dissolved or dissolution of Lok Sabha takes place within this period of 6 months without the approval of or of continuation of the president's rule, as before, the proclamation survives for 30 days from the first sitting of Lok Sabha after it is reconstituted, provided the Rajya Sabha has already passed it. And one more thing about the this extended period of 3 years. The president rule that was imposed in May 1987 in Punjab was allowed to continue for 5 years under the 68 Amendment Act of 1991. So the condition in Punjab was pretty critical and president rule had to be extended beyond a period of 3 years. Then unlike the national emergency, which requires a special majority to be approved, president's rule can be approved with a simple majority for approval from both the houses, the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. The 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976 actually increased the period from extension, the period of extension of president's rule in any state from 6 months at a time to 1 year. So the parliament could extend the presidential rule by 1 year, and this was brought down by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978 back to a period of 6 months. So the presidential rule could only be extended to a period of 6 months and then it had to be approved again. And it also introduced a new provision to put restraint on the parliament to extend the proclamation of president's rule beyond a period of 1 year, which meant that after a period of 1 year of presidential rule, it could only be extended by 6 months, and provided it fulfilled the following two conditions. The first one was that a proclamation of national emergency should be operation in whole of India or in the whole or any part of the state. And the second condition was that the election commission should certify that the general election to the legislative assembly could not be held due to on grounds of certain difficulties. So these were the two conditions that have to be fulfilled for the parliament to extend the president's rule beyond a period of 1 year. So this is very important to understand that the president's rule is applied for a period of 6 months, then it can be extended for a period of another 6 months. And after that, only when these two conditions are fulfilled, then only Parliament can extend it for another 6 months. So it is extended for a period of 6 months at a time. And for the first 1 year, these two conditions needn't be fulfilled. But after that, these two conditions have to be fulfilled for extension of the president's rule by 6 months. I hope this is clear. Now, a proclamation of president's rule may be revoked by the president at any point of time by a subsequent proclamation, and it doesn't need a parliamentary approval for that. So the president can remove a president's rule from any state at any given point of time. Now, when a president's rule is applied in a state, the president acquires extraordinary powers. And let us have a look at these powers. So number one is he can take up the functions of the state government and the powers vested in the governor or any other executive authority in the state. So the president becomes all powerful and he can take up the functions of the state government, the functions of the governor or any of the executive authorities in the state. Number two is he can declare that the powers of the state legislature are to be exercised by the parliament, and this is what is happening in Kashmir right now. So he has to make a proclamation in regards to the president's rule that the powers of the state legislature are to be exercised by the parliament. And number three is he can take all the necessary steps, including the suspension of the constitutional provisions relating to any body or authority in the state. So he could actually suspend the constitutional provisions that are related to any authority in the state. And therefore, when the president's rule is imposed in a state, the president dismisses the state council of ministers headed by the chief minister. So this is the reason why he can dismiss the state council, including the chief minister. Let us have a look at the actions of the president during the president's rule. Number one is that he can dismiss or he dismisses the state council of minister that is headed by the chief minister. Number two is that the state governor on behalf of the president carries out the state administration with the help of the chief secretary and the advisors appointed by the president. Number three is that the president can either suspend or dissolve the state legislative assembly. And number four is that the parliament passes the state legislative bills, so the power to pass all the state legislative bills falls with the parliament for the given state. The latest state to join the bandwagon of president's rule is the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and president's rule has been applied in the state after a period of 22 years. So this was imposed on 23rd of December 2018 after the governor's rule ended on 19th of December. And the state has a separate constitution in which 6 months of governor's rule is compulsory under Article 92 of the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution, during which all the legislative powers are vested in the governor. And the governor has to dissolve the state legislative assembly after this period of 6 months, and the state then directly comes under the president's rule for another 6 months, after which the elections have to be held in the state. So the President Ramnath Kovind has to issue a proclamation declaring that the powers of the legislature of the state shall be exercisable by or under the authority of the parliament, which is of course the second extraordinary power of the president, where he can declare that the powers of the state legislature are to be exercised by the parliament. So this is the second power which the President Ramnath Kovind is exercising in this particular case. So now what is going to happen is that the president's rule will extend for another 6 months, and then the elections have to be held in the state. In case the elections are not held, then the president's rule can be extended for another 6 months. So this is what is happening in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. What is important to remember that before the president's rule is imposed in the state, Article 92 of the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution says that governor's rule is compulsory for a period of 6 months before such an action can be taken. under which the legislative powers are vested with the governor. Now, there have been so many times when people have questioned whether president's rule was really required in a particular state or not. And this has always been questionable because president gets extraordinary powers under this particular article, which is Article 356, where he gets to run a complete state. And therefore, it is important to understand whether the president's rule could be brought under the scope of judicial review and under what circumstances. In fact, it was the 38th Constitutional Amendment Act that said that the president's rule, which was imposed in a state, could not be challenged in any court of law if the president thought that he had sufficient reasons to impose a president's rule in a particular state. And this, however, was changed by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. So, the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978 said that this particular clause, which said that if the president was satisfied, could actually be challenged in the court of law and was not beyond judicial review. In fact, in the Bomai case in 1994, the following propositions were laid down by the Supreme Court in imposition of President's rule in the state under Article 356. And this was also based on a report of the Sarkaria Commission on Center-State Relations in 1988, and where the cases of proper and improper use of the President's rule was actually questioned. So anyways, in the Bomai case in 1994, the Supreme Court said that the proclamation, of course, was subject to judicial review, number one. Number two was that the satisfaction of the president should be based on relevant facts and could be challenged in the courts of law if it was based on irrelevant facts. Number three was that it was the duty of the center to prove to the president that there was sufficient cause for imposition of president's rule. So to prove whether there was enough reasons for president's rule was the duty of the center. Number four was that the court could not actually check whether there was any correctness in the material that was provided for imposition of the president's rule, but could only observe the relevancy. Number five was that the courts of law, if they saw that there was insufficient grounds for imposing president's rule, they could actually restore the dismissed state government and revive the state legislative assemblies, whether it was suspended or dissolved. Number six was that the state legislative assembly could only be dissolved after the parliamentary approval of the proclamation. So as we know that the parliament has to approve the proclamation within a period of 2 months, and it has to be passed by both the houses of the parliament. So this particular state legislative assembly could only be dissolved after that. And number 7 point is that secularism is mentioned as one of the basic features of the constitution, and if the state government was acting in anti-secular politics, it was liable to be taken action against Article 356, which means the president could actually impose president's rule in a particular state if the state government was pursuing anti-secular politics or were just favoring one religious community. And number 8 point is that it generally observed that imposing president's rule under Article 356 is an exceptional power and should be only used under exceptional circumstances. So friends, this was all about president's rule, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. Do like and subscribe to this channel, and in the next video we shall have a look at the financial emergency. After that we shall have a look at the comparisons between national emergency and the president's rule, which lie under Article 352 and Article 356 respectively. So friends, please do share these videos, and I hope the quality of the videos have improved a lot. So thank you so much for watching, and Jai Hind.